Good morning, church. If you've ever seen it, the show, The Office, Michael Scott is a crazy, chaotic, kind of lunatic of a boss of a paper company in Dunder Mifflin, at Dunder Mifflin in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And across the office is the HR person named Toby Flenderson. And Michael Scott cannot stand Toby Flenderson. He really kind of hates the guy, I think. And his crazy managerial style and fun, he just seems to think Toby is a buzzkill. That he calls him the fun police, I think. And in one scene, in one episode, Michael is coming up with yet another crazy idea and a fun one in the office. And here comes HR guy who just shoots down the idea. And visibly annoyed and aggravated with Toby, Michael looks at him and he says, "Why are you the way that you are?" It's a good question, actually. Very funny. But it's a good question. And I wonder if you ever wonder, why are people the way that they are? Melissa and I will quote that sometimes to each other when one of our kids is being a certain way or we see someone doing something crazy. We will say, "Why are you the way that you are?" And why are we? Why are people like that? Why do people live the lives that they do? Why do people behave the way in which they do? Why do people say what they say? Is there something about you and something about me that all of us have that is a controlling source for why you are the way that you are, and why am I the way that I am? That's what I want us to think about today. There's been all sorts of different ways that we try to answer that question or to get answers to that question for why people are the way they are. Oftentimes we will look back into the history of someone's life and look at their family structure and how they grew up and what their parents, mom and dad, were like, if mom and dad were even in the picture, if one of them was. How did mom and dad treat one another? And we'll look through someone's life to try to figure out, why are you the way that you are? We'll look to different experiences that people have had, trauma in one's life that certainly has a profound and shaping influence on their life. We look at relationships that have been great and relationships that have ended terribly. We look at different tests and take different exams like the Myers-Briggs and DISC and Enneagram, trying to figure out why are we the way that we are. We look to our diet and to our exercise and to our sleep to try to figure out, why am I the way that I am? And I think all of these things, your history and your experiences, are all so important and valid in your life. And I would encourage you, for some of them, you really should go work through some of those with a really good, godly, trained professional counselor. I think God has given us those types of people, and we would love to help you in that. That you should do that. Because I know those have a profound effect on a life, and yet we don't all have the same experiences. So is there something in all of us that makes us who we are, that produces the life that we live, a foundation? There is. The Bible tells us so, and I want us to think about that, because I believe that all of us, without question, universally, Christian or not, all live from one single place. And it's the most important thing about you. And it's the most important thing about your life. And what I'm praying, really have been praying this week, is that this morning would serve just sort of as an awakening for you and I to look at this one single place that's making you, you. Because we live from one place. So meet me at Proverbs chapter 4. Proverbs 4 and verse 23. Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life. Keep your heart, for from it flow the springs of life. Have you ever been asked to do something that you have no idea what it is, and yet you try to do it? Maybe your dad said or would say to you, go get the needle nose pliers, and you have no idea what needle nose pliers are, and so you go to the sewing kit. Or maybe your boss tells you to come up with some really sophisticated, businessy sounding document that you have no idea what it is. I used to work in the auto repair industry, not knowing a thing about cars, and managing and working in that way in sales. And I remember early on in that time, a customer came in and asked if I would go and check his coolant. And I said yes, not knowing what coolant is or what it looks like or where to find it in a car. Actually, I think my boss had drove by and texted me and said, I thought I would never see you checking someone's fluids. And I never saw the guy again. But if you've ever done that, you know how frustrating it is to try to do something in which you don't know what it is. The sage here in Proverbs 4 is speaking from the perspective of a father to his son. Look in verse 20. He says, my son, be attentive to my words. And then he says in verse 23, keep your heart. Keep your heart. And a wise son or daughter who doesn't know what the needle nose pliers is or who doesn't know what the coolant is would say to the father, what is the heart? What is it? If I'm going to keep it, I need to know what it is. What is the heart? If your friend across from you at coffee said, what is the heart? How would you respond? I think we kind of get the sentiment and feeling for when we talk about the heart. We kind of understand what we're saying when we say things like, when I'm speaking from the bottom of my heart, you know that I am telling the truth. If you take today, what I'm saying today, to heart, I know that you are listening very well. If your team lost heart, you know they gave up. You're passionate when you put your heart into it. Sometimes people have a change of heart, and now they're thinking differently. I think we get the sentiment, the feeling when we talk about the heart, but how should we define it? But more importantly, how does the Bible, right? How does the Bible define what the heart is? And it does. It uses the word just under 1,000 times to describe you throughout its pages. So let me just give you a smattering of how the Bible uses the heart. You'll remember back in Genesis, in the days of Noah, the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. You know the Shema of Deuteronomy 6 that says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord God with all of your heart." With all of your heart. Hannah was deeply distressed, struggling through what she was, and went to the temple. And we're told that as she went to the temple weeping, that she was, quote, speaking in her heart, that only her lips moved and her voice was not heard. We're told in 2 Chronicles 16:9 that the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth to give strong support to those whose heart is blameless towards him. That's happening today, by the way. The eyes of our God are dashing across the entire globe, looking eagerly, longing to give strong support to those whose heart is blameless towards him. And indeed, the Lord was looking for a faithful heart to make a king. And Saul was there, but Saul's heart was not fully surrendered to the Lord. And so indeed, he kept looking for another one. And the Lord said to Samuel, "Don't look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, for the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." 1 Samuel 16:7. And he chose David. And yet, David's heart turned from the Lord in his disastrous sin with Bathsheba. And in his brokenness, in Psalm 51, David prayed and he said, "You delight in truth in the inward being, and you teach me wisdom in the secret heart." And then he goes on to say, "Oh God, create in me a clean heart." So David's son comes along, Solomon, and yet when Solomon was old, we're told in 1 Kings 11 that his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not wholly true to the Lord his God, as was the heart of David his father. Jeremiah spoke rightly when he said that the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately sick. Who can understand the deep inner person, the deep heart of every man and woman? It's sick. And so the Lord spoke through the prophet Ezekiel, giving hope to those words of Jeremiah when he said, "And I will give you a new heart. And a new spirit I will put within you, and I will remove that heart of stone from your flesh, and I will put into you a new heart of soft, supple, beating flesh." I'll give you a new heart. And the sage here in Proverbs 4, says that the heart is the spring of life. Other translations say it similarly. Maybe you have one of these, that the Christian Standard Bible says that the heart is the source of life. The NLT says that the heart determines the course of your life. The King James says, "Out of the heart are the issues of life." And I love how Eugene Peterson paraphrases it in the Message when he says, "Keep vigilant watch over your heart. That's where life starts." The heart. Look over at chapter 27 here in Proverbs. By the way, 6 months or so now, I have just loved the Proverbs. And I'm sure you know it, but I'll give it to you because it's a new year. There's one for every day of the month. Did you know that? And there's just say to the Lord, Give me one of these things in here that I can tuck into my heart and carry with me all day. So good. Look at chapter 27 and look at verse 19. As in water, face reflects face, so the heart of man reflects the man. You see, as you go out on a boat in the Gulf on a very smooth, very perfect, glassy, clear, good visibility day, and you look out over that boat and look into the water, on a nice day, you will hopefully be able to see, you will see your reflection. Like a mirror, you will see your face as the water reflects it. And what it says here is that then as you look into the heart of a man or a woman, you will find the man or the woman. The heart reflects the person. So what is the heart? Put it real simple. The heart is the real you. It's who you really are. The heart is the real you. It is the controlling core and center and source and spring of who you are. You are the way that you are because that is the way that your heart is. All of life is coming from this one place, in you and in me. The Bible gives all kinds of different words to help us think of the interior world of the inner man and woman. It talks about the soul and the spirit and the conscience. But I believe, as many other writers do, as I've read, that the most important word that encompasses it all is the heart. It's the heart. You are essentially two parts. You are a body and you are a heart, an inner man. It's an amazing scene to think about that I think we pass over so quickly, especially here in January, right? Back to Genesis. When God forms the man out of the dust, you should pause right after that and just think, there's a body there with blood and a heart and lungs, and it's just laying there. And then we're told that the Lord breathes the breath of life into his nostrils. And some translations say, and then he became a living soul. There's two parts of you, your body and your heart. Your inner man, your interior world, and it is your interior world that is producing the life that I see in you and that everyone else sees. It's coming from your heart. It's the real you. We do something with our kids. I'll give you parents and grandparents something for your tool belt maybe. Maybe you already do this, but if we're trying to figure out if one of our kids is lying or trying to get down to the bottom of an issue, what's going on, what Melissa and I will often say to them in that moment is, God looking on your heart? And oftentimes they will either affirm the truth of what's going on, or they will say, no, actually it was like this. This is what I actually did bite his ear, or whatever it was, you know. But we say, God looking on your heart. And you know what we're saying when we say God looking on your heart? What we're saying really is, I can't see the real you through that body of yours. I can't see your interior world. I can't get to your heart. And I need to see in this moment the real you so I can see really what's going on down deep. You see? Because God, and maybe it's a little manipulation, I don't know. Because God really does see the heart. And he's looking at the heart. J.I. Packer said this about the human heart. The human heart is the controlling source of all that we do in expression of what we are. All our thoughts, desires, discernments, and decisions, our plans and purposes, our affections, attitudes, and ambitions, all the wisdom and all the folly that mark our lives come out of and are fueled, serviced, and driven by our hearts, for better or for worse. The heart is the real you. For from it flow the springs of life. And this is why, and this is a really big statement, and you might need to let this come to you, and you might need to dwell with this a little bit, and hopefully just hang with me as we keep going. But here it is. The heart, your heart, is the most important thing about you and about your life, and it deserves your greatest attention. Your heart is the most important thing about you, and it deserves the most attention from you every single day. More than your husband, more than your kids, more than your grandkids, more than your health, more than your body, more than your vocation, more than church attendance, more than anything in this world, your heart is the most important thing, and it deserves the most focus out of you every single day, because out of it flows all the springs of life. You will remember, I hope, what Jesus said when Jesus said, "What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul, forfeit his heart? For what can a man give in return for his soul?" Now, I think often you're here, right? You're following, tracking? Okay. I think often what we think with that verse, those words of Jesus, is you got a choice, friend. You can pick the world or you can pick your soul. You pick. You got a choice here. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. But don't miss, I think, what Jesus is trying to show us. What Jesus, I think, is trying to show us is he's asking, what's the profit of turning in your heart and getting the entire globe and all of its wealth, and all of its desires and pleasures? What's the profit? The answer? None. Negative. Negative. You are negative in the bank when you turn in your soul and gain the entire world. What's he saying? He is saying that your heart, your soul, your inner person is more important and more valuable than the entire world. And it deserves all of our focus and all of your attention. Nothing compares with your heart. Dallas Willard said this. He said, "The most important thing in your life is not what you do, it's who you become. That's what you will take into eternity. You are an unceasing spiritual being with an eternal destiny in God's great universe." The most important thing is not what you do. As honorable and great as some of those things are, like being a grandma, like being a mom. The most important thing about you is who you will become, Willard says, and that is going to flow from within. Now, I'm going to ask some questions, but I'm asking myself. You know, all of us here at this church, we're sitting right there. I've been working this out in my own heart all week. But here's what I want to ask. Why isn't it important to us? Why don't we take an interest in having an interior life? and in thinking about our inner man. Maybe you haven't been shown this, haven't been taught this. Maybe, I think a really big part of this is probably true for you. It is true for me. That we don't think about this. We don't take interest in our heart because we are living at a pace that is not compatible with the slow requirement of deep heart work. We're too busy, and we wear that like a badge of honor. How are you? Oh, I'm so busy. Maybe it is, I'm sure it is, that we don't believe that life comes from within, but that everything outside of us is what's going to build a life and make us who we are. All these and so many more, I think, are sort of enemies and reasons why we don't care and why we don't pay attention and take an interest in our hearts. But let me give you another. When I was younger, some really good friends of mine, Matt and Kevin, took me down to the Turks and Caicos with their family. It was incredible. We had such a blast. They got me certified to go scuba diving, and that's all we did. Wake up, go diving. Wake up, go diving. It was so much fun. It was so beautiful. If you've ever been down in that area of the Caribbean, wow. I mean, it's gorgeous here, but there it is unreal. So clear of waters. The fish are amazing. So clear was it that one night we went on a night dive. So crazy. As we're driving out on the boat, the captain says to us, in the pitch black, good moonlight out there, he says, can you look over and tell me if you see the bottom? And sure enough, you could look straight down and find the bottom. And then we went down into the night. But one day, as we were out scuba diving, amazing, just coasting along the ocean floor and the reef, we were enjoying, and as we were going, we found an edge. There was an edge to the floor of the ocean where we were. And as you swam over that edge, it just went and got darker and darker and deeper and deeper. And frankly, it scared me. It freaked me out. You're going along the floor of the ocean, and then suddenly there is no floor to the ocean. And we swam a little bit down along that edge there, and it was just enough for me to say I'd rather go back up a little bit and be with sharks and barracudas than down there. It's scary. It freaked me out, and it was deep. Heart work is deep work. And you might swim over the edge of your heart and be extremely frightened by what you find. And I think that's a large reason why most of us don't go near it and pay attention to it. And yet, it is from that depth where all of who you are and all of life is flowing from. But it's easier to live on the surface. It's more comfortable knowing where you are out here and not so deep down. It's easier. Sometimes, though, we're awakened to the depth of life, aren't we? In some really great moments of life, like a birth. You watch your kid be born. I mean, you are just brought to the inner world of your life and see the depth of life. And someone passes away, unfortunately, if you've ever been to there is a depth to walking in and being a part of a funeral. I'm sure you could say this, that when you've been to a funeral, if the body is there, you will hear somebody say that they just are not there. They're not there. There's a depth sometimes in our life that is brought to us. let me make a quick parenthesis here. We are in this 2-year initiative that God has brought us to, so clearly brought us to. That's so exciting that he's brought us to 27 acres down there near Welland Park. And what God has led us to call this initiative is Grow. And we called it Growing Deeper and Further. And we have said, and we continue to say, we are not going to let land and buildings and money change who we are as a church. And we haven't. I hope you've noticed. We haven't changed a lick, and we're not going to. But here's what I want to just say to this. I know if we are going to grow deeper and further, it is going to require the deep, hard work of heart work. The best thing that we could ever offer Welland Park and Taylor Ranch area is not a beautiful building. And we're going to have a beautiful, amazing building with lots of great parking. But that is not the best thing we can offer that area. The best thing that you and I can offer that area is a heart flowing with the streams of Jesus Christ. Hearts that have been transformed from the inside out. Why? So that as we're there, our hearts are just flowing with life. Because all of life is going to flow from the heart. And maybe I'll get in trouble for this, but if you're giving money to that and your heart is far from it, I would prefer your heart. Christ would prefer your heart. He said, quoting Isaiah, "Indeed, these people honor me with their lips, yet their heart is far from me." Because we all live from this depth. And just talking about depth means that there is something more than meets the eye. There is something under the surface. And what the Bible teaches, what this is saying, is that it's from those depths that we find the controlling place of all of our life. All of our life is coming from there. I've always sort of thought of this verse as if you don't keep your heart, you're not going to have life. If you don't keep it, you're not going to have life. But what the crazy thing is that what this is teaching is Christian or not, good or evil, your life is coming from your heart. So you better keep it. Look with me at Luke 6, would you? Luke 6. Look at verse 43. Jesus said, "For no good tree bears bad fruit, nor again does a bad tree bear good fruit. For each tree is known by its fruit. For figs are not gathered from thorn bushes, and grapes picked from a bramble bush. The good person out of the good treasure of his heart produces good, and the evil person out of his evil treasure produces evil. For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks." All of life is coming from your heart. It's who you are. And this is a striking, exposing us naked passage, these words of Jesus. Because I think what he's doing is challenging all of us, because we all tend to live externally. We all prefer to live externally. I think this is especially true of religious people. We get really good at making plastic fruit. You ever been fooled by plastic fruit? You get up close, it's plastic, but maybe from far away you might think there's fruit in that bowl there. We are very good at making plastic fruit. But bad trees don't bear good fruit. And good trees don't bear bad fruit. You see what Jesus is saying? He's saying whether you're good or evil, we all live out of our hearts. We live from the springs of life, from our heart. You are the way that you are, and I am the way that I am because of my heart. Melissa gets to see the real heart, right? At home. It's my heart. We all live out of our heart. So this means that we parent out of our heart. Angry, explosive, irritable, dismissive parenting that just rages so quickly at your kids does not come from bad kids who don't listen to you and don't do what you ask them to do. Angry, explosive parenting is simply exposed by bad kids who don't listen to you and don't do what you ask them to do. They are revealing who you really are, and you're just angry. We husband and we wife out of our hearts. Harsh, non-present behavior towards your wife does not come because of her shortcomings and her failure to meet your expectations. It's not what she is or isn't doing that's creating the person that you are, scrolling on your phone, ignoring her all day long. Who she is simply exposing who you are, and you are selfish. Wives, your impatience and your frustration and gossip about him to other wives is not because of your husband. He is being used like a scalpel to open up and reveal your heart. We work out of our hearts. Lazy, do the bare minimum, get by, or cheating the system work is not because your job is terrible and your boss is a dud. Your job might be terrible and your boss might be a dud, but your laziness and you cheating the system is not a result of your boss being a dud. He's just showing your heart. We talk out of our hearts. The language you use or don't use is like an ambassador from a different country. An ambassador stands to represent and witness to and speak for the country with which that ambassador has come from. And when you talk, your tongue, your speech is an ambassador representing and witnessing to your heart. For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. We delight out of our hearts. What we enjoy comes from our hearts. What we love and brings us so much joy is painting a picture for all to see what is inside of our hearts. We entertain ourselves. We obsess, and on and on and on. Friends, if you get anything today, get this. We live out of our hearts. It's the spring of life. And that's why it's the most important thing about you and deserves your greatest focus. And maybe you do struggle with that because you're thinking the Christian life is supposed to be one of service and others-oriented and thinking about others and caring for them, making them your focus. Let me just tell you and could testify. You should not just think about your spouse and try to be a better one to them. You will fail every time. The best spouses, the best parents, the best employees are ones who have a determined focus on the spring of life within and keeping that stream flowing with the graces and mercy of Jesus Christ and communing with him all day long. You will be the best husband there is when you focus on Jesus and abiding in him and consider that all of you is coming out from within. I'm just telling you, you will. Maybe you say, no, you don't know what they're like. That person really does make me angry. They really do create the person I am. Let me just remind you of somebody who was stripped naked in the winter and filleted like a fish with whips and beaten, bloody. If they would have stopped after the beating, he would have bled out and died. Yet they forced a crown of thorns down into his head and through his forehead and forced him to carry a heavy wooden crossbeam to Golgotha. And there they raised that cross up and nailed his open body to that splintery wooden cross until he died. And you know what came out of his heart in that moment? Father, please forgive them, for they know not what they do. His heart was exposed on the cross. And ours is exposed every single day. And maybe all this is just really discouraging. Let me just give you a little note. Maybe it does feel like bad news because you're seeing your heart, maybe for the first time. Let me tell you this. You are not the way you look. You are not your looks. You are not what other people think of you. You will never be your job. Maybe it really is a crummy job, and you should get a new one because it stinks. You're not that job. You're not. You are your heart. For from your heart flows all of your life. You are what Peter calls the hidden person of the heart. That's who you are. And guess what? It is indestructible. It will go on for eternity. Jesus said, don't care about those who can just kill the body. Who you really should care about is the one who can kill the body and throw the heart, the soul into hell. That is indestructible. And only God can transform it and change it and make you to be like his son. But you are not all those things that you think you are that are depressing you and causing you anxiety. So I think we're kind of set up here near the end to think about keeping the heart. What does it mean to keep it? And I don't want to tell you, because you come back next week and think about it next week. Because all I really wanted today is to awaken you to the stream that is flowing within, that is producing who you are, that is making a life. I think we need to be awakened to that. I think the American church and Western evangelicalism needs desperately to be awakened to focus on the most important thing about us, which is our heart. And I wrote a decent amount about that, but maybe it's a bunch of generalizations or whatever. And so I thought I would just share with you what I wrote about me. I said this, but if I'm wrong about the American church, I'll just speak for myself. I live most of my days unaware and disinterested in my interior world, my heart. I live on the exterior. I blame things outside of me for why I am the way that I am. I live on the outside, which is really alarming because my life's work is to care for and equip the inner lives of other people. So I desperately need renewed in this. My interest needs peaked, and I must, no excuses, I must begin to live more and more from the inside out where life truly begins. And the crazy thing is that what the Bible teaches is that even though I and many others live oblivious to the reality of our interior world, just like we live oblivious to the fact that our heart beats around 100,000 times a day, which is keeping us alive and producing a life, even though we're oblivious to our interior world, it is our heart that is the controlling source of all of life, because we all live out of our lives, out of our hearts. But I will say this about keeping it. It's not a far-off guarding. This is an up close and personal, well acquainted with the heart guarding. It requires you swimming over the edge and spending time there. So the homework for you is this. For the next week, just try and pay attention. Just pay attention. And by the way, pay attention to your heart. I'm sure you've been thinking, well, that explains a lot about them, right? He says, guard or keep your heart. So pay attention. When you say something, realize it came from there. Maybe you'll catch yourself. You're about to say something and you realize that thing is flowing up out of me. I need to crucify that. Think about what you do, how you treat other people, what's your priorities. And hopefully, like me this past week, sometimes you'll be pleasantly surprised by what you experience. But also, hopefully, sometimes you will be so disturbed by what you find. Because I just kept thinking to myself as I was looking at my own heart, that just came out of you, Jonathan. That's who you really are. There are things about my heart that I don't understand and I don't like, and areas of my spring that need cleaned up and transformed desperately. And over, I felt like this past week as I was practicing this, taking an interest in my own heart, over and over, I just kept thinking to myself, I need a new one of these. I need this to be cleaned up and transformed so bad. You know what it did to me? It kept forcing me to look to another. Because I can't do any cleaning, transformative work on the inside of my heart. And it reminded me of Jesus, who must have thought of this when he said in John 7, if anybody's thirsty, if you're thirsty for a new heart, let him come to me and drink. And out of his what? Out of his heart will flow rivers of living water. Oh, isn't that good? Let it lead you to the one who will transform your heart. Maybe you're just now realizing that there's more to you than meets the eye. I hope you are. And I hope if not now, later, you will plead with the Lord to give you a new heart. But maybe you see how dark and bad and sinful you really are within. Jesus longs to give you a new heart. You can do that right now with him. You give him yours, and he'll give you his. Pay attention. Jesus. I think we ask what David asked. Create in us a clean heart and renew within us a right spirit. In Jesus' name, amen.